Hi, welcome to this December the 7th, 1900 Facebook Live with me, Dr. David Purvis. I hope you can join me. I'm hoping that some people will jump on and join me. And I've got quite a lot of things. I've made a list this time. I don't normally make a list, but I've got such a lot of things. I've got some really good questions, and I've got some things that I'd like to talk about. And of course, as you know, we've been running the Boost Your Self-Esteem 7-Day Challenge, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that, principally because I think it's virtually impossible to have a psychological problem and not have a self-esteem issue. It's like you can't run a marathon without having done training, let's say. Okay, so self-esteem is such a big thing, and it's really difficult. Hi, Catherine. It's such a difficult thing to kind of recognize in yourself, because do you remember this phrase that I use? You're not the problem, but you have a problem. Most people think they are the problem. Hi, Louise. And that is the problem in a sense, right? And self-esteem is one of those things that really plays into this bias that we have of thinking that we are the problem. Now, you know, with anxiety, I can demonstrate to you that your brain's overestimating threat. It's not that hard. You know, I can tell you a few stories, I can show you some stuff, and I can even demonstrate it. But with self-esteem, because it's the sort of, it's the sort of, I don't know, it's the way we present ourselves. It's much more difficult, I think, well, I sometimes think, to see that self-esteem is just like anything else. Hi, Sarah. It's just like anything else. It is a process, and that process can go well, or that process can go poorly, and depending upon which way we put our focus, that's the kind of experience that we're going to get. And I think that it's been interesting. Well, it's interesting. The last time we did a Facebook Live, we were talking about chronic health, and before that we were talking about PTSD. And there are a few things which, in a sense, themes which have threaded through the whole process, I think. And I'm going to be talking about some of those. But it was that sort of theme of low self-esteem, of damaged self-esteem, of damaged self-concept that really kind of revealed themselves in the comments that people made, although they weren't necessarily aware that they were making comments on their self-esteem. And they weren't necessarily aware that they were even struggling with self-esteem, let's say. But I think it's really interesting. I have this general motto, right? And it's stress is optional. Now, I talk to a lot of people about stress, and I generally manage to help them to not be stressed. You know, I teach them some tools to not be stressed. You know, we restructure the kind of the stress cognitions and whatnot, you know. And as a general principle, after I finish working with people, you know, they're a lot less stressed, and sometimes, you know, they're barely stressed at all, and, you know, they feel great, right? That proves that stress is optional. If you come to me and you're massively stressed, you know, really stressed, you know, practically on the edge of a nervous breakdown or burnout, we do some sessions, and then you're not stressed nearly so much, you know, you pull back from burnout and you feel much more in control. That tells you that stress is optional because you haven't changed your job. Nothing in your external circumstances has changed particularly, but what you've changed is the way that you think about it, is the way that you approach it, is the way that you kind of interpret the experiences you have. Stress is optional. And what became clear when we were doing the PTSD one a few weeks ago is that more or less people suffer what they suffer, right? They suffer their experience. They suffer from their experience. They just get on with it, really. I mean, people are very resilient, you know, not probably too resilient, not resilient in a good way. They suffer in silence, or they just get on with it, and it's you know, I just don't see any gain to it, right? If stress is optional, depression is optional, anxiety is optional, PTSD is optional. I mean, you know, the things that cause PTSD are not optional, but whether you actually continue to struggle with PTSD has an optional element to it. It's like whether you get treatment or not, you see. So self-esteem, hi Gillian, self-esteem, good self-esteem, I'm going to say is optional. Now, we've been running the 7-day Boost Your Self-Esteem Challenge. I thought it was an interesting thing. I've been thinking about it for a while, and I kind of sprung it on everyone. But I thought, well, why not, right? Why not see if we can do something in a very short period of time? So I developed 2 tools that I generally use in practice, and some of you may be familiar with them. And so what we did was we set up a competition between what we know to be true and how we feel. Now, we have to think about, we've got to kind of jump into this idea of internal and external reality, okay? And external reality is this is all my bookshelves behind us are external reality, and what's in here is internal reality. And if you haven't done so, I would urge you to watch my my video about the virtual reality simulator in your mind, because that's what's going on, right? So what we did was I asked you to find the most negative belief you have about yourself, and that was difficult. Some people found that really quite tricky. And that most negative belief about yourself, it's a bit like injecting yourself with cyanide, a little dose of cyanide every day. Or it's a bit like, I believe that powdered glass is very bad. So if you bump people off, you give them powdered glass, let's say, right? I don't know. It's like having a little dose of poison every day. So the most negative belief you have about yourself is a little dose of poison. And what it does is it poisons your experience. Now, I am well aware, and I'm sure you are too, those of you who are members of the group, and I think everyone is right now, is that everyone experiences in the group, everyone experiences less joy, less happiness, less satisfaction, less calmness, less, whatever is a good thing, less gratitude, less comfort. Everyone experiences less than they want. And one of the reasons for that is because every day you're poisoning yourself, or you could call it your inner critic, is poisoning. Your inner critic is poisoning you with this most negative belief you have about yourself. If you had diabetes and you needed to take an insulin injection every day or whatever, right, you'd do it. You'd test your blood, you'd do it. You'd do what you had to do for a physical problem. But for a self-esteem problem, you just live with it. You just suffer it. You just say, well, it's stressful at work, or people don't like me, or I don't get out very much. You just live with it. And I'm saying you don't have to live with it, but you have to do something about it. And so we found the most negative belief you have about yourself, and then we created a mantra which challenged it. And the example I've been using is, I am worthless. That'd be my most negative belief about myself. And the alternative to that is, I'm a good person, I have value, and I do the best I can. And I asked you to practice that, 10 repetitions in a set, 20 sets a day. Now, sometimes people say to me, well, that's simple. And I say, yeah, after 25 years of developing it, it seems very simple. But what we've done is, we've set up a competition between external reality, because everybody in my group here, everyone in the Panic Pit Stop group, and everybody I meet, right, everyone's a good person. No one's evil, no one's bad, no one's nasty. Everyone has value. And if you recollect the story I tell about people in the desert who are naked, the richest man in the world, the most beautiful woman in the world, a poor man and a poor woman, the richest man in the world might say, I deserve the single bottle of water because I'm the richest man in the world. But the poor man might say, in this desert, you've got no clothes the same as us. We are exactly the same. So your personal value is the same as everybody else's. And I tell you, it's very difficult to find people who deliberately do poorer than they can. It's very difficult to find people who deliberately underperform. Everyone, we all can underperform, but we don't do it deliberately. Very hard to find people who do it deliberately. So it is true in external reality, excuse me. Steve would like the picture of the bird. In external reality, I am a good person, I do have value, and I do the best I can. Now, that is in direct competition to the most negative belief I have about myself, I am worthless. And so by using the mantra, we've set up a competition. Now, I'll talk about it a bit more as we go through, but actually what happens as we go through these things is that you start to notice the difference between your external reality and your internal reality. And some of the comments on the Panic Pit Stop group have been saying, you know, I'm starting to feel a change. I can recognize this is true, but it evokes feelings in me, negative feelings, when I sort of practice it, because your inner critic and your negative belief do not want to go quietly. So the second exercise we did was we created a mental slideshow. Now, every psychological problem, and I'm going to be talking about eating disorders, but I'll trail what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about how to have a better relationship with food. I'm going to be talking about how to have a stress-free Christmas, if that's of interest to anybody, and how to be confident at work. But right now, I'm going to talk about cognitive bias, because I asked those people involved in the challenge to find 4 memories, real memories from their memory bank of good experiences where they felt good about themselves, or whether they felt that they achieved something, or they felt proud. And it was quite hard to do. It's quite hard to find 4 experiences. Not because you don't have lots of experiences, but because you're not used to looking for them. And I thought to myself, isn't that profound? Isn't that actually profound? That it's much easier for you to bring up a negative fantasy that never happened to mind than it is to bring up an accurate, real experience that you have had in your life. Yeah, like Gillian says, negative thoughts trying to creep in and deny my mantra. Yeah, I know. These negative thought processes, they're well developed. And as I've said many times, if you want to become good at something, you must practice. And these negative thought processes are very practiced. So we set up what's called a competition a competition between your external reality and your internal reality with memories. And I'm asking you to practice this. I call it the mental slideshow. I developed it years ago for the Blues Be Gone program, and it really works. And once you get the hang of it, it's really quite simple. And I mean, there's different ways to do it, but in principle, 5 or 6 minutes, 6 or 7 minutes, right? And you've done it, the whole thing. So the mental slideshow is very, very quick to do. And because a picture has in its, when I ask you to bring up the picture, like the slide of your good experience, the picture is connected to the whole of the experience. And it's connected to other experiences which are similar. And so your brain, your neural network actually invigorates the other memories that are close to it and also associated with it. So actually, you're strengthening your memory bank of positive memories. And that, in the end, is how you know that you're a good person and you have value and you do the best you can. Because if someone was to say to you, are you a good person? You'd take a moment and you'd think about it. And what came to memory would be your answer. And, you know, it's not a question, right? Like, do you have value? Well, you think about it, right? And what came to mind would be your answer. And so if you've been practicing the negative, that will come to mind and that will be your answer. And everybody, when I ask them, says to me, not really. But after we've done the work, I say, do you have value? Say, feel I have value. Say, I feel I have value. How choose? Yeah, it's like 6. Okay. So it moves. Your value moves. Depending upon which way, depending upon what you access in memory and what you practice. And that is why I am now saying that good self-esteem is optional. If you don't have good self-esteem, it's because you've been practicing, allowing negative memories to occupy your mind. And if you do have good self-esteem, it's because you've been practicing accessing your actual life, your external reality. And I think that's kind of, well, it's pretty profound. I think it's pretty profound. If you think it's profound, give me a thumbs up or something like that. Just to well done, Karen. Had a good day today with my positive day of the positive memory day. Well done. So give me some thumbs up just to let me know that you're still there and I'm not just like going on a bit. Now, thank you for the thumbs. Thank you for the thumbs. Yes, please. Lovely. That's it. Anyone else on? Please, if you're on, say hi. Now, if you struggle with chronic stress, and chronic means like long term, and we talked about that a couple of weeks ago on a Facebook Live. If you struggle with chronic stress, it has life altering characteristics. it makes your life harder, but it also makes you more prone to ill health, and it can, at some point, shorten your life, because chronic stress, has a characteristic of damaging your DNA by shortening the sort of the strands at the end called telomeres. And as you get older, they shorten naturally, but stress kind of extra shortens them. Hi, Amanda. So if you have a good sense of self-esteem, if you feel like you're a good person, you have value, you do the best you can, if you're doing a job, you're quite competent in your job, if you own where you are in your life, in a sense, it's much harder to experience stress than it is if you are hypothetically being in a fantasy place where I'm no good, I can't do stuff, I'm not worthwhile, I'm not confident, nothing works out for me. Because all of those are memory bias stories. So I hope that, and I think it's been interesting, this sort of self-esteem challenge. I did wonder if I'd bitten off a bit more than I could chew, making videos every day and whatnot, but it's been interesting. And just while I remember, those of you who are in either any of the Panic Pit Stop courses or the Dr. Purvis bundle or anything like that, you'll find the full 7-day Boost Your Self-Esteem challenge in your library on probably Tuesday. So all of the videos and the paper resources and everything in this 7-day Boost Your Self-Esteem challenge is going into your library. Of course, that's just built into the fee that you pay for the programs. So you can go through it again at your leisure. There are also some bonus videos put in that I've taken from other places to give you a bit more background, and also to give you a bit more depth of just understanding how your self-concept is so critically important if you want to have a happy and kind of fruitful life. For those of you who are not on any of the Panic Pit Stop or Dr. Purvis program bundles, I urge you to do so, because and I'll be speaking about this when I talk about eating disorders, the effort you need to put in has to be somewhat consistent and somewhat prolonged. It has to be like a number of weeks of effort. It's got to be 2-3 months of effort to overcome something like anxiety, a clinical anxiety disorder, or a clinical depression disorder, or a PTSD or something. We need to put some effort in, and we need to be consistent about it. And so I developed the Panic Pit Stop and Mood Control courses and my old Blues Be Gone course. I developed them to keep you engaged with different stuff every day for long enough for you to make that journey. And originally, my first program was 12 weeks long, something every day for 12 weeks. Wow. Mood Control was 12 weeks, but Panic Pit Stop's only 6 weeks. So I've shortened it down and I made it a little bit more intense and a little bit more focused. But you have to be, if you actually want to have change, you have to be on a program. Now, I worked it out. If you want to be on the Panic Pit Stop or the Dr. Purvis program bundle, but it was basically the whole thing, all the programs are there for you. It costs you the same as 3 Starbucks coffee, a bottle of sparkling water, and 2 cakes at Starbucks. Actually, it's cost you less than that. I used to take my old dad out. I've just moved him into a nursing home on Monday, and he's doing all right, but he's 99 3/4. And he used to come out with us, my wife, me, my son, and we go to Starbucks and we have a couple of cakes and some coffees and teas. It's £23. And I wouldn't really think, I wouldn't think too much about it. Or if I get him fish and chips, he likes fish and chips, 2 fish and chips, that's £14 something, right? A week of membership of all of my programs is, I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. Now I can't find it. It's £17.50. So you can get all of the programs that you need for as little as £17.50, and that actually is going to get you on the journey, and that will take you to where you want to go. I mean, just look at the comments people make when they're on the program, right? And it enables you to help yourself without having to go on an NHS waiting list or anything like that. So it's actually an alternative to therapy, in my opinion. Now, I got some fantastic questions, so thank you for that. And what I thought I'd do is, I thought I would address this question: who would like to have a stress-free Christmas? Does anyone want a stress-free Christmas? Give me a thumbs up if you want a stress-free Christmas. and I'll tell you how to have a stress-free Christmas, I promise. And it's a guaranteed stress-free Christmas. Who wants to have a stress-free Christmas? Anyone? I'm not seeing any thumbs. There we are. Okay, you've encouraged me to have a stress-free Christmas. Okay, right. So I got this brilliant question, and it basically is, Christmas is a very stressful time for me as I absorb everyone else's stress. What are your tips to get through the change in routine? So let's say, what are the tips to get through a stress-free Christmas? Okay, all right. What causes a stressful Christmas? Now, by all means, type in what causes a stressful Christmas. I'll give you some options just to help you out, right? Do you need to make it brilliant for everybody? Do you need to make sure everyone has a great time? Do you need to put in so much preparation that it's easy on the day? Do you need to please in-laws or relatives and all sorts of other people? Do you find that the quantity of things that you have to do, the organization and all the rest of it is like too much? Do you find the preparation too much? So all of those would be, oh, Gillian, last year Asda cancelled my food bill, my food order. That's not very good. Okay. I think there are some common things that we can do that would turn your Christmas into a stress-free Christmas. Now, some of these, of course, are going against the grain, right? The first one is, if you have to make everyone else's Christmas great, if you're responsible for everyone's Christmas, if you're responsible for people having a good time, then you're, in principle, being a people pleaser. And that means that everyone else's experience is more important than yours. Now, answer this question. You need to type quickly so we can keep it moving forward. Yes, Louise, we all want a perfect Christmas, which causes stress. Now, you should know better than that by now. Right. Oh, what was the question? Who is the most important person in your life? Right. Quickly type in, who is the most important person in your life? Anyone? Who is the most important person in your life? Hobby. Okay. Who else? Have another guess. Who is the most important person in your life? Me. Well done, Sarah. Right. Oh, hubby, the cat. Okay. The most important person in your life has to be you. Now, I learned this years and years ago. I was working with a man who had been involved in a road traffic accident where the other person got killed. He was a lorry driver, and he had been involved, his lorry had been involved in causing somebody else to die. Now, his self-concept was that he was a person who helped everybody else. That was his thing. He helped everybody else. And he could not reconcile the idea that he had caused someone else's death. Furthermore, he couldn't remember the accident at all. Complete blank. And I saw him like 20 odd months after, and his life was in ruins. He couldn't work. He was just crying all the time. He couldn't bear it. He was just like beside himself. And one of the things we had to do, I had to say, well, look, you have to be the most important person in your life, because if you don't look after yourself, if you can't function, how can you help other people? If you can't function, how can you help other people? And he went, oh, yeah, I guess. And so we started a process of where he became the most important person in his life. And when he'd sorted out what he needed, he then helped other people according to what spare capacity he had. When you selflessly give, if you do it enough, actually, you're going to cause yourself medical and psychological problems. If you selflessly give, you are kind of destroying your life chip by chip, a bit like having a little pill of poison every day. Hi, Tracy, welcome. And you know, the second most important person in your life can be your husband or your wife or your cat or your mum or your dad. But the most important person in your life has to be you. Now, if you're having a stressful Christmas, the most important person in your life is not you. And that's the first thing we need to change, right? You have to start recognizing that you are important. And being selfless and being people-pleasing is actually just creating stress. I've already said, stress brings on physical and psychological problems, and it shortens your life. So why not, instead of having a Christmas that's actually going to shorten your life, why don't we have a Christmas that enhances your life? And so when you focus on yourself, you're making decisions based on what pleases you. And I'll tell you the strange thing, right? Although obviously you've trained people in your family or whatever to be, to expect. But once you start pleasing yourself, once you start focusing on yourself, other people just fall into it. Nobody really cares as much as you do. And so the third thing is, first one's focus on yourself. Second one, stop being a people pleaser. The third one is, no one else cares as much as you do. Now, does that make sense to you, that no one else cares as much as you do? Because if it does, yeah, if it does, give me a thumb or give me a heart or something like that, right? No one cares as much as you do, but that's because you care too much. Probably because you have high standards and you want things done to be right. You want things to be done so that people can enjoy themselves. But I tell you what, people will enjoy themselves anyway. It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, really, nobody cares. You're the only one that cares whether it's perfect. Release yourself from the prison of perfection and join the rest of us in, it's good enough. I couldn't be bothered to do any more. That's good enough. And nobody else will care, and everyone will have a lovely time. But what's more is that you'll have a lovely time because you'll be looking after yourself. And furthermore, why not get other people to look after you a bit more? Why not actually get other people to value you? Louise says the most important thing is time spent together. Yes, but when you're stressed out of your mind, you're not there. You're trying to do the next thing. You're trying to do the next thing. You're not sitting down and being together. You're not actually being with the people that you care about and you love. You're being in, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got to. You're kind of elsewhere. That's not very present. It's not very mindful. The thing is, though, and this is the thing, what will it tell you about you if you don't make it perfect? What will it tell you? What beliefs are you going to evoke if it's not 100% and 110%? What beliefs in you will it evoke? I mean, what will you think about yourself if it's not, absolutely perfect for everybody else? It'll probably make you feel bad about yourself. It'll probably make you feel like you haven't done a good enough job, or it'll probably make you feel lazy or something like that. But that wouldn't be true, right? Would it? That's your internal inner critic. That's your self-esteem, your negative belief about yourself kicking in. You see how it all that kind of links together? External reality is people would probably want you to be relaxed and calm and cheerful and happy and being with them and having a kind of a close family experience. And you'd like that too, but what you're actually doing is you're trying to solve the problem of making it perfect, and no one cares that much. But in so doing, you're spoiling your Christmas. And you only have, like a limited number of Christmases, right? Before, the kids are gone or people move on, So I would suggest changing your attitude to Christmas and having it as a pleasant experience, as opposed to something that you have to fight, tolerate, and work through. And that's my secret for a stress-free Christmas. Okay, now I got a really good question about eating disorders. So, relationship with food, really. Let me just read the question to you. I have a really bad relationship with food. I put on a lot of weight after my mum died and I left home. I was 16. I went on a diet and didn't stop and became anorexic for many years, getting to the point where I was supposed to go into hospital. I didn't and managed to get my weight up again to be okay. Since then, I was thin for many years, but after having children, put on a lot of weight a couple of times and then lost it all. My weight's okay, maybe slightly over. I have an underactive thyroid and autoimmune disease and fibromyalgia, which make any serious exercise impossible, although I challenge that as much as I can. My weight is a huge source of stress for me, and I watch everything I eat and I get stressed if I eat the wrong things or I feel fat. So my question is, how can I have a better relationship with food? Note, I don't eat junk food, I don't drink sugary drinks, I don't eat processed or pre-packaged meals, and I don't eat a lot of sweets or cakes because sugar makes pain worse. I am well, I have a constant stream of folks coming into my clinic who want help with serious conditions like eating disorders. And I almost never find any value in focusing on food with them. Now, the reason for that is the worst thing you can do, I think, with someone who has a preoccupation with food is to focus on food. Because food is not the problem, food is a consequence of the problem. So let me just say again, food is not actually the problem, it's a consequence of the problem. The actual problem is a kind of it's a complex, let's call it a complex map of forces, and I'll just sort of share some with you. There are likely to be, and everyone's got genetic influences, right? Some people are a bit more predisposed to have a particular body type, and so there's a body type, let's call it a body type issue or a familial genetic issue, and there's not much we can do about that. Okay. We might also have some physiological things, and those are kind of, that's just your body, right? I mean, I'm starting to go thin on top, which is a physiological thing, right? So it's just what it is, but I live with it. Okay, but now we're into the psychological. If you have a focus on food, or if you have a bad relationship with food, food is likely to occupy quite a lot of your attention. And food should not occupy quite a lot of your attention, because food is simply, I mean, we can be interested in food and wine and stuff like that, but actually it's a fuel, let's call it, and it doesn't need to occupy a lot of what you do, right? Other things are, let's say, more important. So what the first thing we have is we have an attentional bias. That means that your system, your kind of psychological system, has learned to over-focus on food. Now, if you were particularly panicky, if you had this, I mean, our group's called Panic Pit Stop, but if panic was a big issue for you, you would be very, very focused on looking out for signs of panic in your body. And if you found signs of panic, you'd focus on them, and that would make them worse, particularly if you hadn't been through the course and if you didn't know how to deal with it, right? If you were very self-critical and a bit depressive, let's say, and you noticed that something didn't go quite as well as you wanted it to do, you'd probably ruminate on it, and that would kind of magnify the enormity of the problem, and that would make your mood go lower. Okay, so every condition, everything we can think about that we would call a psychological problem has an attentional bias in it. And the first thing we have to do is we have to recognize that attentional bias. I am not the problem, but I have a problem. Well, one of the problems that you have is an attentional bias, an over-attention on food. And so we need to, I mean, we can talk about this another time, but in principle, we need to practice widening your attention so that food becomes something which is not so, not so important, and other things are catching your attention that are not like food related or whatever. The second thing is you have a memory bias. Now, if you think about the mental slideshow that we've been doing in the self-esteem challenge, right? The mental slideshow is hard. It's hard to find 4 memories because the negative 4 good memories, because the negative memories are so strong, and the negative memories, most of them didn't happen. They're fantasies. Now, fantasies also create memories. So if you practice, practice a problem for long enough, you'll have a huge memory bank of fictitious and fantasy experiences, and they kind of like tell you who you are as opposed to reality. So with eating disorders and many problems, it's not different. We have a memory bias, and we've got to recognize that I am not the problem. I have a problem. My problem is a memory bias. The third one, though, is this person says, my weight is a huge source of stress for me, and I watch everything I eat, and I get stressed. So my weight is a huge source of stress for me, because it is evoking negative beliefs, like the most negative belief you have about yourself. It's evoking negative beliefs which make you feel bad, because if that negative belief was true, right? If I am slightly overweight, I'm a bad person, I'm a failure, I've lost control, I'm no good, no one will like me, no one will love me, I won't have any friends. It's really catastrophizing. My weight is a huge source of stress for me. Okay, I watch everything I eat. That's an attention bias, and I get stressed if I eat the wrong things or feel fat. So we have an attention bias, and then we have catastrophization. So this was such a brilliant question, because in this question, if we actually read it with a sort of a detective's mindset, or an interpreter's, well, like a psychological mindset, right? It reveals a lot of the processes that are actually causing the problem and keeping the problem in place. Now, food's not the problem. The problem is the processes that we're running in here that make food the problem. Attention bias, memory bias, cognitive bias, and cognitive distortions, right? Like catastrophizing, like doing all or nothing thinking, like perfectionism, right? If it's not perfect, what is it? Everybody type in, if it's not perfect, what is it? What is it if it's not perfect? Who remembers? Anyone typing? What is it if it's not perfect? Yes, Louise, it's failure. Perfect. Failure. Two places to be. Only two places to be. But like, what? I mean, come on. There are not two places to be, because nothing's perfect and nothing's a failure. We all live in the bit in the middle. And so this thing, you know, where I must watch everything I eat, that's perfectionism, right? And if I don't watch everything I eat, that's self-critical. That's the most negative belief about yourself coming out. And that's then, you know, like making the stress rise. So I wrote down like 4 things, but I've got some other things which I'll just reveal. But look, this is what I thought. The way to go with this is to stop focusing on food as an issue. Is to practice opening your attentional system. So practicing moving your attention from food to other things so that it becomes less rigid. Rectify your memory bias, and the mental slideshow is a good way of rectifying that memory bias, because then when we start to think about particular aspects of the food experience, and you have had some strong aspects, I understand that, we move it to positive aspects that tell you you're a good person, that you have value, you do the best you can. Right? This is history. We don't need to keep dragging history into the present. And lastly, change the beliefs that you have about yourself. Change the sort of it's like a hierarchy, right? Change the automatic negative thoughts, change the core beliefs, change the schemas and deep-seated thoughts that create this problem. And that's what we do in the Panic Pit Stop and drpurvis.com programs, of course. So I'm going to finish up with some tools that we can use as a general tools, but I've just addressed that question a bit. I mean, obviously it's not a comprehensive answer, but you know, it's something to be going on, and it's something to think about, because most of the time the thing that you think's the problem is not the problem. It's a consequence of the problem. And I think that was a brilliant question, and that's the answer. Now I got this. This is a good question. Also, I always worry that I will make a mistake at work, or that I will say something stupid and make a fool of myself at work. I worry that everyone will think that I'm weird or stupid. How can I address that? Does that resonate with anyone at all? That is a question that many people would be able to write. And it's like a social anxiety question, right? I worry that I'll make a mistake. Now, I never met a person who worried that they'd make a mistake that actually made mistakes. I only ever met a person who worried that they'd make a mistake who was a perfectionist. Does that make sense? Regular folks who are not perfectionists, they go, well, you know, whatever. It's only the high standards that you have that make this such an issue, because actually, you know, you'll be adequately competent, you'll be adequately educated, you'll be adequately able. You know, people who are working and concerned about making mistakes are adequately able to do all the stuff they need to do, and they don't make mistakes. Because if you made a lot of mistakes, to be honest, they'd let you go. You don't make mistakes. So that's not the problem. The problem is that you worry about making mistakes. See, I think I will make mistakes at work, and then people will see that I'm a fool. People will see that I'm stupid. People will see that I'm boring and uneducated. People will see that I'm weird. No, people won't. You are not the problem. You have a problem, and the problem is you worry about what people think about you. The truth, of course, is that people don't think about you. People getting on with it. They've got their own fancies going on. They're just going about their business. So what we have to do is we have to change your relationship to internal reality, right? So I'm saying that you don't make mistakes. You're perfectly competent and capable, and you know you're perfectly able to do what you do. That's not your problem. Your problem is that you're not confident that you can do it, right? And you've lost your confidence because inside your internal virtual reality simulator, you're running all sorts of fantasies and worries. Yeah, but what if people can see that? What if people see me panic? What if people see me make a mistake? What if people can think, well, look, she panicked and she looked really weird, right? These are what ifs, and what ifs are always based in the where, the past, the present, the future. Where do what ifs live? Where do unanswerable questions live? Past, present, or future? Anyone? Where do worries live? Past, present, or future? Type in past, present, or future. Where do worries live? Future. Well done, Louise. Right. So you're creating like a loop of fantasies that are based in the future. But I'll tell you the worst bit, right? When you get to the bit of future that you're fantasizing about and nothing bad happens, you just ignore it and move on. So it's like you're always bouncing a ball into the future. And when you get to where the ball landed, you pick it up and bounce it again. You don't say, oh, nothing happened, I was perhaps wrong. You pick it up and bounce it again. Oh, nothing happened, you just keep bouncing it on. So it's a process. Okay. So I figured I made a list of 5 things to do to stop that process. It's not you that's the problem. You don't have a problem. It's what you believe about yourself is the problem. I'm not good enough. I can't do it. People will think I'm weird, which is mind reading, crystal, crystal gazing. I'm not clever enough. I'm boring. So it's what you believe about yourself. That's the problem, and that's why you have to change the beliefs you have about yourself. You've got to do some stuff. So like mantra exercise or mental slideshow to rebalance your internal to your external reality, so that your internal, that's it, everyone knows future, yeah. So that your internal reality is more calibrated to actual reality. You have to do that. Doesn't matter what the problem is. If your internal reality says this, and your external reality, this is actually what happens, is this, and you've got a big gap, you have to mind the gap, because that gap is a measure of how stressed you're going to be. Social anxiety is a process of imagining you know something you couldn't possibly know, where they're looking at me because they think I'm strange. I'll laugh at this one. So people say that to me. Yeah, but they're looking at me. People look at me. I say, well, how do you know they're looking at me? Well, I'm looking at them. Okay, so you're looking at them and you see them looking at you. Do you think they're looking at you because you're looking at them to see whether they're looking at you? Oh, yeah. Okay, so we stamp on the social anxiety characteristics of mind reading, of imagining people have beliefs about us, and that they know things about us. Now, every day, find 5 examples of doing something where you're competent. So basically find 5 examples of being competent every day, not confident. If you find 5 examples of being competent every day, you're bit by bit restructuring your experience, and by focusing attention on those 5 things every single day, you're building a memory bank of good experiences, and that becomes an antidote to your memory bank of negative social anxiety experiences. And finally, don't confuse uncertainty with incompetence. We've been talking, about specifics and generals, right? Specifics and generalities. Specifically, these are so this is a specific problem, but it has overlap with so many other ones, and it probably has a control issue thing, right? You probably want to try and control as much as you possibly can so that you don't make mistakes. That's a mistake, because you're trying to control the element of inherent uncertainty that there is in life. And I'll tell you I'll cut to the chase and tell you what the answer is. The real secret of emotional control is to let go of the need to have emotional control. Now, that's a journey, but it would be an excellent example of real control. Sarah asked, what would be an example of being competent? Well, what is it that you do every day? So every day I see clients, yeah? So an example of being competent with me would be having a good session with the client. An example of being competent would be to write a letter or a report. I do a lot of reports for the courts. So I write a court report, or I make an amendment, or I do stuff. I'm busy all day doing stuff, right? I'm busy all day doing stuff. I'm sure we all are. And anything that you do, competently, you could say, well, actually, I did that competently. I did that well. That's one of my 5 things. I wrote a court report, and it was all right. I write court reports all the time, and when they send them back for amendments or other kinds of things, I find so many spelling mistakes. No one seems to care. That's fine. So anything that you do all day long, because you don't notice the things that you do that are perfectly normal and ordinary. All day long you're doing stuff you do not notice. Oh, I cooked the dinner and it was perfectly fine. You don't give yourself any credit for it. But you give yourself credit for imagining, if the dinner was burned, what would people think about me? Hasn't happened, see? So we just got to balance off this internal negative bias with actual reality to the extent that we can. So don't confuse uncertainty with incompetence. Just because you don't know what the outcome is, just because you don't know how to do something, just because you don't know how it's going to go, does not mean you're incompetent. Because people don't know how things are going to go, but they figure it out. And I would bet that you'll figure it out too. So I had a list. I guess I've covered some of them to some degree, but I made a list of tools that you could use. Let me just run by them, run them by you, and perhaps we can get them typed out or something at some point. So, number 1, open your self-critical habits of thought to the wider world, which basically means judge, recognize that you're doing self-critical habits, and don't assume that they're accurate ways of thinking. And is your self-critical habit calibrated to what the world's telling you? Number 2, ask a trusted friend to help you practice or moderate your high standards. If your standards are higher than everybody else, it might be all right, but it might be indicative of a problem. And to be honest, your high standards, if they're higher than everybody else, become a rod with which you can beat yourself. And that's not the best thing, okay? Ask a trusted friend to help moderate your high standards. I'm going to do this. Is that like too much? I want to paint this wall. Well, no, that's fine. It'll be fine. Okay. Remember that no one cares as much as you do. Therefore, you're the one driving things, no matter what you think. So, You might say, yeah, but it really matters to the family that we have a really good Christmas. No, it doesn't. You're the one that cares as much. You're the one that cares more than anyone else. Therefore, you are driving it. If you want to have a stress-free Christmas, you have to drive that. If you want to have a stressful Christmas, you have to drive that. Now, here's a revolutionary thought for you. Do you want a stressful Christmas or a not stressful Christmas? Well, why don't you choose? Because you never normally choose. You just default. And I'm a big fan of making deliberate choices, right? Why don't you choose to have a stressful Christmas or choose to have a non-stressful Christmas? But don't then not make a decision and then complain it was stressful, right? So no one is going to judge you. People tend not to judge people, right? I mean, regular folks tend not to judge regular folks. No one's going to judge you, and you can do what you want, you know, and more or less it's fine. And if men tend to do what they want, people don't judge them. If you're a black and white thinker, which means basically if you've got the perfectionist style, draw a line on a piece of paper, put P at one end, put F at the other end, and then put 2 lines in the middle and practice living in the middle. Nothing's perfect, nothing's a failure. Practice living in the middle where everybody else lives. And lastly, when you're tempted to criticize yourself, ask yourself this: what would a trusted friend say about this? Would a trusted friend criticize me for whatever? Or would they kind of say, nah, it's okay. Don't worry about it. It's fine. It'll be fine. Is anyone else criticizing you to the extent that you're criticizing yourself? I would suggest not. Okay. Oh, and finally, sorry, I was just a last question came in. How to deal. Oh, and by the way, let me just say before I'm going to deal with I'm going to talk about how to deal with complicated grief. All of the tools that you need to deal with all of these issues are within the Panic Pit Stop program bundle. So if you want to know how to do any of this kind of stuff, and you want to be supported while you go through the process, because obviously it's not a quick fix, right? There's no angel's going to fix it for you. You have to change the processes because the processes are in here. But if you want to know how to do it and you want to be supported while you do it, then get on the Panic Pit Stop course. Now, how to deal with complicated grief when the person you're grieving is still alive. Now that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's not grief, but it feels like grief. But what is it? I would suggest it's imagining what life would be like without them. Now, a powerful imagination can imagine some dreadful scenarios, and that would be a dreadful scenario, right? What will life be like without them? The trouble with that is, and you might say, well, you know, yeah, but life would be horrible. Yeah, no, that's not the point. The point is this: when you're imagining what life would be like without them, you're not actually spending time with them. You're not giving them all of the time that you could give them, time and attention. You're not giving them the time and attention to be with them when they're with you, because you're spending your time and putting your emotions into imagine what things would be like without them. So I hope you can see that I know it comes from care and it comes from love, but it's misguided, because to love and care for someone is to focus your attention on them and to give them what they need now, because the future will take care of itself. If you bounce yourself in the future, that's the classic anxiety problem, right? You bounce yourself in the future, you catastrophize, and you miss the opportunity to have the pleasure of the person's company in the moment. So Gillian says, being a perfectionist makes you critical of others. It can do, but you've got to admit you're more critical of yourself than you are of other people. Okay, so my suggestion would be to refocus your attention on the person that you're with now, and enjoy the time that you have with them, so that when they go, you could honestly say, hand on heart, I had the best time I could have with them. I did the best I could, right? If you can honestly say, I did the best I could, and believe it, right? I did the best I could, then it's a big help when you actually have to be in grief after you've been bereaved, because at least you don't feel guilty and if you think you did the best that you could. Okay, so that is all of the questions that I got, and I thank you very much for the questions. I thank you for being part of the group and interacting and, you know, being part of this process. We're trying to help people to help themselves out of panic, anxiety, depression, stress. I call it cracking the code, right? Everything in here is encoded. We crack the code, we understand the process, we fix the process, we move on. That's what we're trying to do. So finally, if you're not a member of the Panic Pit Stop program, please join. You'll find that the whole self-esteem course in there in your library on Tuesday, and work through things and, you know, take responsibility for your outcomes and make it happen, right? All of this, panic, anxiety, stress, it's all optional to a very large extent. And if you don't choose to go the positive way, then you're defaulting into the option of, well, it's just what it is. I hope that you found this interesting. Thanks for taking the time, and I appreciate that. So I shall say happy Friday.